will play in Super Bowl 59? That is the question that you're asking. And you're wondering, who does Mitch believe will win the AFC, the NFC championship games and play in the Super Bowl? So in this video, football fans, BLV freaks, I'm here to break it down. A winner of the AFC will be crowned between Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes. Mahomes has beat Allen not once, not twice, 3 times in the playoffs. They are tied at 4 apiece in the series, and only one can be the king. Only one can win the conference and advance to Super Bowl 59. You will find out who I'm picking and why in this video. In the other game, we have the most dynamic playmaker in the NFL, the home run hitter, Pennsylvania's own Saquon Barkley, and the Philadelphia Eagles. Can the Eagles carry Jalen Hurts to another Super Bowl? Or will the Washington Commanders complete the crusade? Will they, the Cardiac Kids, pull off another comeback? Another upset? That's the NFC Championship, an NFC East affair. So in this video, I pick them both straight up and, of course, versus the spread. Let me know in the live chat or in the comment section below who you're picking to advance to Super Bowl 59. Gronk, spike the like button. Don't forget to subscribe for weekly NFL previews, picks, predictions, and of course, recaps and more. If you want another look from Mitch, me, you can head over to Owner's Box Fantasy, where I've also done an in-depth breakdown of Super Bowl, or not Super Bowl 59, but of the AFC Championship. We will have an in-depth breakdown on Owner's Box Fantasy for Super Bowl 59 before it even gets to the bottom line view. So I've posted a video, a preview, a picks video already on Owner's Box Fantasy, guys. I will leave that video in the description and also in the pinned comment for you guys to watch if you want another piece of content from me. Just head over there, Owner's Box Fantasy, and check it out. Okay, let's get to it, guys. Shout out to the chat. Deshaun, Big Al, Tyree, Jimmy, Motor City Kitty, Dookie in the chat, Caesar in the chat, Tong in the chat, Sing in the chat. All the homies are in the chat. And I see 33 jabronis currently in the live chat, but only 7 likes. That doesn't calculate. Gronk spiked the like button. Let's go. Let's start it off with the first matchup on Sunday. The tale of the tape. The Washington Commanders versus the Philadelphia Eagles. The Commanders have pulled off upset after upset. They went to Tampa Bay and they defeated the Buccaneers. They went to Detroit, the number 1 seed, and defeated the Detroit Lions. Meanwhile, Philadelphia didn't exactly look filthy versus the Packers. They also, they just barely got by the Rams. They looked sloppy. But this is the most complete team and roster in the NFC. So can the Commanders overcome them? The Commanders, 9th in DVOA. Eagles, 4th. Commanders, 4th in offense. Eagles, 7th. Commanders, 25th in defense. Eagles, Second, clearly a little bit of a mismatch from an all-around perspective. But the Commanders' offense, I would argue right now, is playing the better football. They're playing silky, smooth football. They're not making mistakes. They're converting fourth downs. And they're creating explosives, both through Jaden Daniels' arm and his legs. And there might not be a quarterback that's being asked to do more in this round of the playoffs than the rookie, Jaden Daniels. Meanwhile, on the other side, you've got Jalen Hurts and the Eagles. They're going to be run heavy. They're going to put you to sleep with how much they give the ball to Saquon Barkley. But that's their plan of approach and attack, and it's probably going to work once again in this matchup. We'll dive into why. But Saquon, he's at the forefront for Philadelphia if they want to get to the Super Bowl. The Commanders, the Eagles. Let's start it off with this. These two teams have already played twice. Okay? The spread is 6. Philly is favored by nearly a touchdown at home. The game that was played in Philly earlier this season was a Thursday night football game in which I streamed live on the channel. The Eagles won, and I believe the Eagles also covered that game because I remember betting on the Eagles, and they covered. The Eagles, I would say, are seen as easily the favorites and will be picked by 95+% of the population. There might be a small percentage of people that pick the Commanders because they think they're fun or they think what they've done so far can correlate to their success in this game and end up in the Super Bowl. But there's plenty of people that honestly I can't deny that just feel like the Washington Commanders with a rookie quarterback simply cannot make it to the Super Bowl, but that's not good enough reason to pick the Eagles. Okay? Now, I kind of feel like both of these offenses and the way that these teams want to play are structured similarly. They both want to keep possession. They both want to ball control. They both want to go on long drives. They both want to be able to have a lot of plays. They both want to be able to wear on you, right? Offensively. They want to be able to control the game through their long, many play drives. Now, the Eagles have more so benefited off of their explosiveness lately, especially from Saquon Barkley, and honestly, they're living dangerously when it comes to Saquon Barkley. If he does not hit a home run, it feels like their offense is completely, not there or existing. Meanwhile, the Commanders are also living dangerously with how often they're going for it on fourth down. And there could be a game in this Eagles game here where what if they don't make a fourth down or two? That could completely turn the tide of the game. It could end up losing them the game, right? So the Commanders are getting a little fortunate in what they're doing, but it's also correlated to their victories as well, right? They've played on the edge with their philosophy and the way that they're moving and matriculating the ball, but it's also, a little bit of a dicey scenario of having to convert so many high leverage plays, third and fourth downs. Okay, so in the first two matchups, the Eagles built significant leads in both games. The Eagles held a 21-7 lead in the second game in Washington. And in the first game, it was 26-10 for Philadelphia at home. Now, the Eagles also held a 27-14 lead against the Commanders in the second game, even with Kenny Pickett playing for over 3/4 of the game. Jalen Hurts left when it was still only 7-0. Now, the ball was already in Washington territory, and the Eagles were moving the ball on the ground at will with Jalen Hurts in the game, rather by Saquon running it or Hurts running it himself, and they were heavily leaning into that asset of their offense. But Kenny Pickett got in there, and he was still able to execute for a good portion of that second game. But eventually, third, fourth quarter time came, and he couldn't quite be the same player in the red zone. And that definitely came through where the Commanders were able to make some timely stops, especially for field goals, and they were able to come back in the second game from 27-14 and end up winning the game. Now, it also benefited because Devontae Smith did drop a pass, which ended up, helping them win that game. That was definitely a big play in the game where that game probably would have been over if he doesn't drop that pass. In the first game, though, they were extremely successful. They were it was their best success rate of the season offensively for the Eagles in the first game of the season. It was their second best yards before contact game of the entire season. So the Eagles were great on the ground in the first game, but extremely efficient in the first game as well. Saquon has rushed for 145 plus yards in both games. He's rushed for 100 plus in 8 of the last 9 games. And yeah, it's extremely Saquon reliant, but are the Commanders the team that are necessarily going to slow that down? I'm not quite sure, because the Commanders have been one of the worst run defenses all season. We saw the Bucky Irving show, in Tampa Bay, and the Bucs were able to run the ball a good amount in that game in the first round. We were able to see Jahmyr Gibbs go crazy, and honestly, I feel like if the Lions just gave Gibbs the ball on every single play of that game, they probably would be in the NFC Championship. I'm not going to lie about that. Now, some of the other stats that are pretty interesting going into this game: Washington has been 3 for 5 on 4th down against Philadelphia in the 2 matchups. So they've gone for it 5 times against the Eagles. They've converted 3 times. So that's 60% for those of you that don't know math. That is pretty significant. It's in line with the percentage that the Eagles allow for the entire season. They're 24th in allowing 4th downs at 64%. So the Commanders, I think in order to win this game, they're going to have to be able to get to a lead, in my opinion, for the first time in this series. They're going to have to be able to have long possessions, take the ball control and possession element out of Philadelphia's game plan, and they're going to have to continue to convert 4th downs. The Washington Commanders are also 6 for 9 on 4th down for the entirety of the playoffs. So a pretty high percentage overall against Detroit and Tampa. I will say that the Eagles defense is a significant rise in opponent and caliber from the Bucs and the Lions. Looking at the Lions, it's hard to say with the Lions because their metrics are skewed because of when they were healthy, they were a decent defense. But without a lot of their players, they were one of the worst defenses in the league. Tampa Bay was good against the run, but Tampa Bay had clear significant deficiencies in the secondary in which Washington was able to take advantage of. In those games as well, Washington turned the ball over 6 times, including 5 times in the second game, in which Washington won the game with 5 turnovers. Which is pretty amazing. They also scored 22 points in that 4th quarter to win that game, which honestly I don't think is repeatable. So they're going to have to be better in the early portions of these games against the Philadelphia Eagles. McCaffrey also had a couple nice returns in that second game that helped them out. But like I said, Jalen Hurts left the game at 7-0. So I definitely look at the first game as more of an indicative element of what we might see rather than that second game, right? So those are some interesting stats. Now let's break down the Eagles offense versus the Washington defense. I kind of feel like the Eagles are going to be able to stick to their plan A and have a lot of success with their plan A, which is obviously Saquon Barkley. Like I said, it was their second best yards before contact game in the first matchup. It was their best success rate. Also, Saquon has had a lot of yards in every game, but also a lot of yards against the Commanders, and they have not stopped Saquon to this point. Now, can the Commanders figure out some way, shape, or form to be able to pack the box, take away Saquon, or at least limit his explosiveness, and maybe just early in the game get a couple of stops, right? Washington has been very, very good in the playoffs. In my opinion, the reason Washington has advanced in the playoffs is because they've been able to get the lead and they've been able to play their style of ball, and they've had really good defensive game plans in the first 10 minutes of the game. They were able to slow down Baker and the Bucs early enough to be able to gain the advantage, the leverage of time of possession, and be able to play their style on offense. And then against, Detroit, they were able to do the same thing. They stopped Detroit early in the game. They were able to get a lead. And then eventually that led to the Lions being a little bit more mistake prone. It also put the Lions defense on their heels, and the Washington Commanders were able to control the entirety of the game and get a lead and build on a lead, right? So I think the early portion of this game in terms of Washington being able to just slow down Saquon enough, throw a curveball at Jalen Hurts through the blitz or something like that is going to have to be there, and it's going to have to be successful. Now, one of the issues with Washington is not only is their run defense as a whole very weak, And across a number of metrics, yards before contact, yards per attempt, success rate, EPA. It doesn't really matter. They're a bottom 10 run defense in the NFL, right? They're not good, but also they play a lot of man. And if you look at Jalen Hurts and you just think about what Jalen Hurts is as a quarterback, Jalen Hurts benefits when you play man because he has great receivers that can beat man coverage and because man is easy to read. Guys are tracking their guy, right? Like zone, you've got to actually read from progression to progression and see where you're going to go with the ball. Man, it's more like, okay, is this guy open? He's my first read. If not, okay, I'll go to my second read. I can always just throw a jump ball to A.J. Brown or Devontae Smith and they can bail me out. I can always just go to Dallas Goedert, on this route and he's going to win and I could throw it to him on the out route or whatever, right? Like it's much easier. Hurts does struggle when he has to read coverage and when he has to trust his reads in the middle of the field and throw it through multiple defenders. Now, I thought something that Washington did as a curveball to the Lions was play much more zone coverage and kind of ramp up the dial of zone coverage that Dan Quinn was able to play, which forced Jared Goff to make some mistakes and throw into coverage very often, which resulted in some interceptions. But the Commanders as a whole do play the fourth most man coverage in the NFL this year. So if they do go to man coverage in order to help them to stop the run, does Marshawn Lattimore, can he match up with A.J. Brown? Like getting him in a trade, does this become the game where he really helps or not? Is he still washed, right? Does Devontae Smith have a revenge game after that drop? Is he able to torch whichever defender is on him? The rookie out of Michigan, for example, who had a very nice game against the Lions. Dallas Goedert could also be a huge factor here for the Eagles, in my opinion. He's been great in the playoffs throughout his entire career, catching 5 passes per game and 54 yards per game in his playoff career. So Dallas Goedert is somebody to really look out for. Washington is also not great against tight ends overall. And Goedert has been kind of the most successful option for Jalen Hurts in these playoffs, in my opinion. He's looked the best in the yards after catch scenarios and the quick throws and all that sort of stuff that seemingly complements the Saquon run game. How active is Jalen Hurts as a runner? Like, how effective is he in terms of the injuries that he has sustained, or how healthy is he? Because if Hurts is not able to run, that could be enough of a tide that turns this game. Like, if Hurts is not effective or even clearly being a threat in the running game, that could clearly change how Washington is able to play the Eagles offense. It changes how you can rush Jalen Hurts. It changes how you defend the run and your run fits. It changes a lot about how you go about stopping the Eagles if Jalen Hurts isn't a legitimate threat to run the ball, right? So I foresee a pretty decent Dallas Goedert game. I foresee a pretty good Devontae Smith game. I am relatively uncertain how healthy A.J. Brown is right now and how much he'll be really involved. On the surface, he should dominate, especially against a man coverage-oriented team. And he did have a very good game the first time around, especially early in the game. But I don't know if he's 100% healthy. And Hurts' legs also make me believe that he's going to be trying to get the ball out quicker and looking for his one-on-ones with Dallas Goedert quite often. Defensively for the Commanders, they need their big interior defensive linemen to step up here against the run and the pass. Jonathan Allen and then also Daron Payne. Dorrance Armstrong has been very impactful as a pass rusher. He had 2 sacks in the game last week. Believe he had a strip sack on Jared Goff. And Jalen Hurts is coming off a game against the Rams where he did take 7 sacks. Not 5, not 6. 7 sacks. Okay, 7. Because he holds the ball too long, and sometimes he lacks the confidence to pull the trigger when he doesn't see it well. So can the Commanders throw off the timing and the rhythm of Hurts and make him hold the ball for their pass rush to get there? Because even as great as this O-line is, we saw the Rams are able to get sacks on Hurts when he is a little shaky back there. So basically, the Commanders need to force Jalen Hurts to beat them. And if he can beat them, so be it. If not, if you don't force Jalen Hurts to beat you, you're going to lose. Because Saquon's going to run all over you, and you're going to have a very tough time. And if you make things too easy for Jalen Hurts, especially playing too much man coverage against these receivers, I think it's going to be very hard to limit explosiveness. They might be able to limit efficiency, but eventually you're going to get beat with the big play, okay? The Eagles, like, passing offense has been borderline pathetic. Like, they had 65 adjusted pass yards last week, and I understand it was in the snow, but, like, Stafford was still able to throw it through the snow, but, like, Jalen Hurts had 65 yards. 65, okay? So I'm looking forward to seeing this matchup just from a clearly outmatched Washington defense. What do they bring from a creativity perspective to give them a chance, especially early in the game, to win this matchup? Because I don't think they're going to stop the Eagles, once we get down the stretch and once the Eagles start wearing them down and start running the ball. But early in the game, can Washington get that edge to set their offense and Jaden Daniels up for success? If not, we could see the Eagles run away with the game. Like, if the Eagles are able to have a little bit of rhythm in the passing game, their receivers show up and start making some plays, and then the Commanders are kind of like, oh shit, like, what do? We can't really sell out to stop the run because we're getting toasted on the outside. If we play conservative, we're just going to get ran over and we're going to lose time of possession, and they're going to win the game that way. So it's a really tough thing. It's a very tough thing for Washington to kind of figure out. But if they can be opportunistic, they can win the turnover battle like they did last week, there is plenty of possibility for them to pull off an upset there. On the other side of the football, we've got the Washington offense versus the Philadelphia defense, one of the hottest units in football versus one of the best units in football. Cliff Kingsbury has been an absolute magician with his game plans and also his play calling and situational play calling. I thought the biggest edge that Washington held against Detroit was Cliff's ability to know when Aaron Glenn was going to blitz and when to attack him with a screen, like Terry McLaurin hitting a touchdown off of, basically nobody being in front of him in the Detroit backfield. Like, Detroit had one defender on 3 on the left sideline. That was ridiculous. Like, that is an example. Or setting up Daniels with options to beat man coverage or the blitz. And then Daniels' composure to be able to sit in there and then hit the right throw at the right time, with Cliff giving him the right recipe to be able to beat Detroit's man coverage against the blitz, right? But this is a polar opposite approach. So Fangio is oftentimes very conservative in his coverage, a lot of too high coverages, a lot of 4-man rush. He doesn't blitz that often, and I don't think he'll blitz that often against Jaden Daniels unless it is to on purposely kind of contain him from running. Like, I think that would be the only way that they really blitz. And then Glenn is on the polar opposite spectrum last week, where he is kind of, with the current personnel that he had, he was honestly an idiot, like idiot. Okay, Aaron Glenn, absolute jabron. But Vic Fangio probably won't fall into that same trap of being a little bit too aggressive. And he also has the personnel to maybe play a little bit better man coverage or, personnel matchups on the outside than Aaron Glenn. Because Aaron Glenn didn't have the corners, especially when Amik Robertson went down. But Fangio does look like he'll have Darius Slay, Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, the safeties, all those players, except for their linebacker, Ultra's boy, Nakobe Dean, who is out for the year. Okay. Continuing with this, guys, don't forget to Gronk spike the like button. If you haven't already liked this video, make sure to like this video. It helps the channel. It helps this video reach more NFL fans, football fans, Eagles fans, Commanders fans, Chiefs fans, and Bills fans. So make sure to Gronk spike the like button. And if you haven't already, subscribe. Continuing with this matchup, okay? So I think for Washington to have success, I think they're going to have to go about it and being patient. I think something they can lean into is Jaden Daniels on designed runs on early downs. He had a lot of success in the second game in which they won at running the ball. And that was the stark difference between the Commanders' win and the Commanders' loss against the Eagles. In the win, Daniels had 81 rushing yards, and when they lost, he had 18. Okay? In the game in which they lost, he only had 191 passing yards, and he threw a pick, and he only had an 81 passer rating, okay? So Daniels, I don't think, is going to be able to... It's kind of weird, because in the first game, he basically hit no downfield shots, like at all, like 0. In the second game, the only thing that worked for the Commanders was the downfield shots. Like, you would often watch them play, and it was like in that game, and it was like, okay, Zacchaeus, big play. Terry McLaurin, big play. De'Ami Brown, big play. There's like 3 or 4 big plays that turned the tide of the game for the Washington Commanders on offense against the Eagles. And then there was like a scramble by Daniels every once in a while that converted a 3rd and short or a 4th down and long or something like that, where Daniels was just able to make magic with his legs or just toss the ball up deep. It was kind of a stark difference between what we saw in the first game. I think Fangio is going to tend to go a little bit more conservative in his coverage, keep a cap on it, and I think he's going to force Daniels and the Commanders to run the ball and be patient and try to run the ball against the 2 high defenses and the 2 high safeties. And I think they're going to have to force, Daniels to throw the ball underneath and be very patient with like 3 and 4 yard gains in the run and the pass and the screen game and all that stuff. But luckily, the Commanders have been very efficient in that regard as well. I think one area that the Commanders can attack is Zach Ertz in the middle of the field. I do think that the middle field in general, without Nakobe Dean, it was a little bit more open against the Rams, it did feel like. And there was plenty of tape that the Rams put out there in order to how to take advantage of some of these coverages from the Eagles. Now, I think the Commanders will score some points, and I think they'll move the ball, but I'm a little shaky in terms of I just don't know if they'll be able to sustain it as much as the Eagles will against this caliber of a defense. I think that the Sam Cosmi injury that Washington sustained on their offensive line is a really big problem. He's arguably their best offensive lineman, and he's their best guard by far. He played the 4th most pass blocking snaps this season, according to Pro Football Focus, and he allowed only 1 sack for the entire year. One of 11 guards in the entire NFL to only allow 1 sack or fewer. So Cosmi is a really good player, very underrated, and he could have an impact on how efficiently the Commanders are able to run the ball. That might not be there. And then their ability to sustain drives and even protect, or even protect against Jalen Carter, who, in my opinion, I know that Chris Jones is seen in the other game as perhaps the best D-tackle in football. But if you really watch, Jalen Carter might be the best D-tackle in football this year. He is just ridiculous. Last week, he was insane. The week before he was insane. Jalen Carter has been a problem. He is peaking at the right time for this defense. And I do think guys like Zach Bond who fly around, Nolan Smith being a very fast linebacker uniquely, maybe helps containing Jaden Daniels a little bit in this matchup as well. Terry McLaurin is always somebody that you have to pay attention to in these matchups, and it feels like he's played a little bit worse against the Eagles than a lot of the opponents that he's played against. Quinyon Mitchell has given him a little bit of issues throughout these games, so can some of the other guys like De'Ami Brown, who played really well last week, step up? Zacchaeus had a huge play in that second matchup, one of the plays of the year, in my opinion. Can he make a big play or two? So some of the secondary guys are going to have to step up, maybe even Austin Eckler in the underneath passing game to function as an extension of the running game as well. But a lot of pressure is on Daniels here, a lot more than there is on Hurts. I don't think Hurts necessarily has to play well for the Eagles to win. Another element to this game is literally the elements. Like, it's going to be cold in Philadelphia, probably not snow this time. But Daniels and the Commanders have not played in an actual cold game all season, and he played at LSU, so I'm not exactly sure how functional or good he'll be in comparison to his usual self in those type of elements and environment, because he is a much skinnier guy, and just being a much skinnier guy, it's easier for you to be cold. Right? Jalen Hurts is a freaking truck. So I don't think he's really, really worried about that. And even the hits kind of wear on you a little bit more when you're kind of a skinnier dude. So that's going to be interesting to watch from that perspective as well. But I kind of think this is dangerous for the Eagles a little bit. I could see an avenue for the Commanders to win this game, as I've discussed. I think if they can win the turnover battle as they did last week, if they can win the 4th down battle as they have this playoffs, if they can get an early lead and an early stop, there's a chance where this could get, interesting, where the Eagles are having to play left-handed. But I think if the Eagles are just in the game until halftime and it's like within a score, or if the Eagles are in the lead, I just don't see how the Commanders can win this game. So I think the Commanders need to kind of have a lead, a decent lead going into like the third quarter. I really think so. Because I just feel like once the game continues to go and once the Eagles are able to play in this kind of balanced scenario or game script, they're just going to continue to run the ball, and eventually they're going to hit home runs, and eventually they're going to wear you down. And the thing is about the Commanders, like we've said, like they want to play this certain ball possession style, but the best team at that maybe in the league outside of possibly the Chiefs or the Bills maybe is the Eagles, right? Just their ability to lean on you and run the ball. So I think the Eagles defense, the home field, the run game, and just the physical differences between the line of scrimmage play, it's just going to be too much to overcome for Jaden and too much to overcome for the Commanders. So I'm going to take the Eagles to win, and I'll take the Eagles to cover. I'm not exactly confident about the cover. I could see the Commanders making this like a 3 or 4 or 6 point game in which they do cover. But I could also see the Eagles, when you think about the previous games, right? The Eagles had 2-score leads. The Eagles covered the first game by more than 6. They were leading 21-7. They were leading 27-14. They were leading 26-10. So if that happens again, it's likely that they cover, and it probably will happen again. So I think that the Eagles win, and I think that the Eagles cover. I'll say like something's telling me like 27-20 or something like that. I'm hoping that it's this close. But there is a scenario where the Eagles kind of somewhat run away with it. And there's also a scenario where the Commanders steal it, like I said. So this should be a good game. I'm looking forward to it. The Eagles are clearly the favorite, clearly the more talented team. I think in order for the Commanders to win, they're going to have to catch the Eagles with a couple curveballs defensively. They're going to have Jalen Hurts play poorly, which is very possible. And Daniels is going to have to continue to play well, mistake-free football, which he didn't actually do in the last time they played. So that's my preview and my thoughts on the Eagles and the Commanders. Let's check the chat before we get to the next game. Scott's got Redskins versus the Chiefs. Jeffrey says temperatures will be upper 30, low 40s. Also, Daniels has played in 2 to 3 games this year in temperature in low 30s. All right, I thought it would be maybe a little bit colder, and I have heard from other people that they haven't really played in a cold game. So thanks for the clarification, though. I do think that it's a very small factor. It's nothing too crazy. Singh says Chiefs 29-26. Okay, we're not there yet. Caesar says Eagles 31-23. Malia is in the chat. That's your name, right, Malia? I'm sorry if I got you wrong. Sarah's in the chat. What's up, Sarah? Jabroni. Scott's in the chat. Shout out to Scott Duncan. Any thoughts on this game? Lego My Ego's waiting for the Chiefs breakdown. What's up, Jeremy? How you doing? Malia says Mitch hates the Chiefs. All right. I don't see too much on this game, so I think I'm going to move on. How many Super Bowls have I seen the Patriots win, like watching it live on TV? The only one that I didn't watch was the first one. I might have watched it, but I was only 5 years old, so I can't really remember, to be honest. I do remember watching the second one, though. All right, let's get to the second matchup, guys. We only have 25 likes, so make sure to spike the like button. Subscribe if you haven't already. Put a lot of effort into these previews. Also, head over to Owner's Box Fantasy if you guys haven't already for more of my content. Let's get to the second matchup. The AFC Championship. Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes. Exactly what it should be. It's the fourth playoff matchup between the two best quarterbacks in the NFL. The two top names in the sport. It's Peyton, it's Tom, it's Brady, it's Manning 2.0. These two, 4-4, regular season and postseason combined. I know that a lot is made of 3-0 for Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs. So this storyline is all about Josh Allen. Can he finally overcome the demons and defeat the Chiefs? No less in the kingdom of Arrowhead. That's going to be the question. The Chiefs, their only legitimate loss this season was against the Buffalo Bills, and we're going to heavily lean into what happened in that game in order to explain what we could see in this game. On top of that, the Buffalo Bills, many have argued this might be their best overall team that they've had since Josh Allen has become the quarterback, and they have more experience than they've ever had as well. The Chiefs, nobody wants to bet against because they're back-to-back champs. They're going for a three-peat, and three-peat is history, but it's also history that's never been made. And is it more likely that they lose this game than the Super Bowl? Probably. If the Chiefs do make it to the Super Bowl, it's hard to envision them losing. I would say that, right? So let's break down what could take place between Patrick Mahomes, Taylor Swift, Travis Kelce, Andy Reid versus Josh Allen, Sean McDermott, James Cook, and the Buffalo Bills. The Mafia, the Kingdom. Let's talk about it. The tale of the tape. The Bills, 3rd in DVOA, Chiefs 6th. Offensively, Bills 2nd, Chiefs 9th. Bills also defensively 11th, Chiefs 15th in EPA. Okay. Bills also had a significantly better point differential. So, at least statistically, not record-wise, but statistically, the Bills were the superior team during the regular season. But the thing has always been between the Chiefs and the Bills. The Bills beat the Chiefs in the regular season, but they don't beat them in the playoffs, and the Chiefs are able to elevate in the playoffs. Last week, I felt like the Chiefs, they were the only team in the history of the sport to achieve what they did and win. So it's kind of interesting. They didn't really elevate their game in that game. They did enough to beat the Texans, but it wasn't super impressive, while the Bills, they were very impressive against the Broncos. And in the second game, they got a little lucky against Baltimore, but Baltimore was seen as the worst matchup in the league for the Bills. So they did have to get a little lucky for them to win, which we broke down last week. Okay, now going back to the first matchup. By the way, Kansas City is favored by 2 at home. Now, going back to the first matchup, who was there and who wasn't? For the Chiefs, there was no Watson, their number 2 cornerback. There was no Hollywood Brown, no Isaiah Pacheco. And at left tackle, they were playing Morris and not Tooney. For the Buffalo Bills, they did not have their right tackle Spencer Brown, linebacker Matt Milano, tight end Dalton Kincaid, or wide receiver Keon Coleman. Okay? That game ended 30-21. When looking at the players that were missed, I would argue that the Bills had more significant players that missed the game. Matt Milano being arguably their best defender, Spencer Brown being one of the best right tackles in the league, and Dalton Kincaid being just a player that uniquely matches up well with the Chiefs. While the Chiefs could definitely benefit from Hollywood Brown in this matchup and Watson to help them pass and stop the pass, I don't necessarily feel like those are bigger deals than what the Bills were missing, but they were both missing players nonetheless. 30-21 was the final score. It was in Buffalo. It was 23-14 for the Bills at one point when Curtis Samuel was wide open on a crosser underneath for a touchdown. It was then 23-21, making the game very close. And then at the end, the Bills had the ball with 7:53 remaining, held the ball until 2:17 left. Josh Allen ran the ball 4 different occasions and took one in for the epic touchdown that is maybe the play of the season, especially if the Bills go on to win the Super Bowl. 30-21 was the final score. Now, what was unique and what stood out statistically in that game? That was the worst EPA allowed by the Chiefs defense in a game in the entire season. It was also the only team for the entire season to score 30 points on the Chiefs. The Buffalo Bills. The Bills were also far better on 3rd and 4th down, 10 for 17 on 3rd and 4th down, while the Chiefs were only 5 for 11. And that is significant because the Chiefs have been really good on 3rd down this year. So that's interesting. The Chiefs also didn't score a point in the first or the third quarter, like not a single point. So they were held without a point in 2 of the 4 quarters. There was a little bit of a lull during that game, I would say in like the third quarter, like right after halftime. Nobody could really do anything on offense for a little bit. Now let's break down the sides of the football, the Bills offense versus the Chiefs defense first. Now I think perhaps the biggest factor in this entire game will be the run game. And I think the biggest reason the run game is so significant is because both of these teams have shown a want to possess the ball. Just like the Commanders and the Eagles, they very much function, more so the Chiefs than the Bills, but they function a lot based on being able to win time of possession. And the run game is a huge factor here. Now, what's impressed me about Buffalo is that they have been super impressive running the ball against 2 of the best run defenses in the playoffs in the NFL. So they ran the ball the best. They gave the Broncos and the Ravens their worst run defense output of the entire season in back-to-back games. In the first game, the Bills were not able to run the ball against the Chiefs with their running backs at all. Their running backs averaged 3.6 yards per carry or less. The Chiefs at that time were arguably the best run defense in the league. We'll discuss whether or not they're still at that point. Allen did have 12 carries, 4 of them coming on the last drive. I think that Allen will have at least 12 carries in this game. I think he might carry the ball 15 times. But I think a lot of it might be more early in the game rather than just late in the game. I think that because this is a playoff game, I think we'll see more of it early rather than late. The Chiefs have been weaker against the run lately than they were back in that game. Shout out to Ultra. He gave me these stats. So the Chiefs' run defense during week 1 to week 8 was 3rd in EPA per play and 8th in success rate, while from week 9 on, they are 22nd in EPA per play and 15th in success rate, including games against Joe Mixon last week where he ran the ball pretty well. You know, the Steelers ran the ball pretty well. There were some games where teams were able to run the ball against the Chiefs a lot better than they were early in the season when the Chiefs looked like one of the best run defenses in the league. What was also a huge factor with the Bills not being able to run the ball against the Chiefs in week 11 was Spencer Brown. Spencer Brown being injured. The Bills have been most effective running the ball to the right this season, which is where Spencer Brown lines up. He is the highest graded run blocker on the team and ranks 13th among all tackles in the NFL. The Bills have ran the ball to the right for 447 yards this season, 5.3 yards per carry and 7 touchdowns. Against Kansas City, they had 5 attempts for 6 yards, 1.2 yards per carry, and they did have a touchdown. The first touchdown of the game was James Cook running in for a touchdown. But that's significant. Spencer Brown was a huge factor there in the run game, and I'm interested to see how that differs this time around. Now, the run game, I do think Buffalo will be able to run it better than they did the first game for sure, just because I haven't really seen them run that poorly all year, and I do think Spencer Brown was a big part of that. I also don't think the Chiefs necessarily want to sell out to stop the run because Josh Allen is so good throwing the ball. So I don't necessarily think that the Chiefs are just going to line up and force Allen to beat them. That would kind of be idiotic. So I do think that the Bills will be able to run the ball quite a bit on early downs and kind of establish what they want to do through the ground game. And we'll discuss whether or not the Chiefs will be able to do the same thing on the other side. Now, in the passing game, the Bills' running backs and tight ends are always influential to how they play. This, in my opinion, could be the game that Dalton Kincaid was drafted for. The Chiefs have been the worst team against tight ends. I talk about this every week, but they've been the worst team against tight ends all season. And Kincaid did not play in the first game. So he could be a big guy to go to in man-to-man situations and or third downs to be able to convert. Dawson Knox had 4 catches for 40 yards in the first game. He would also be a guy that usually does have success against the Chiefs, to be fair, but he could be another component there as the secondary option at that position. And these two players could maybe give the Chiefs some issues. Rather than trying to attack McDuffie, they might be able to hone in on those safeties and those linebackers to be able to pick their matchups there. Another guy that had a sneaky good game against the Chiefs last time was Curtis Samuel. He had 5 catches for 58 yards and a touchdown. And just based on what I saw, I think it's because of how shifty and fast he is. I think for the number 2 and number 3 corners of the Chiefs, he is a difficult matchup because those guys are more so tall and physical rather than fast. So I think Curtis Samuel is a guy to watch for in a prop standpoint as well. He could be somewhat sneaky. Ty Johnson is also a really good option out of the backfield that could make some plays, as we saw against the Broncos on one of the best catches I saw all season. Now, one of the questions I have is like, how much man are the Chiefs going to play? Because if you play too much man against Josh, he's proven he can burn you and toast you. And, you know, you are pressing those receivers and making them make plays, which is kind of the dicey element of the Bills' passing attack. Like, the Ravens kind of did win those matchups more often than not last game, and a lot of the Bills' passing game was underneath and screens and quick passes. But I think that was very intentional, not only because the Bills got out to a lead, but also because I think that's kind of what they wanted to do. They wanted to keep the ball away from Lamar Jackson and not allow that potent Ravens offense to wear on their defense and try to do the opposite to the Ravens. So I think they tried to kind of go dink and dunk in that game, and it was fairly successful overall. Enough for them to win, certainly. Now, I do think because of the style that the Chiefs might play, they might lean a little bit into that. They might have to blitz a little bit against Allen to be able to get pressure, because in the first game, it felt like they couldn't get pressure with 4. You know, the Bills have a very good O-line this year, which might be the difference maker in whether they win this game or not. Like, whether they've won or lost these games in the past has kind of come down to their ability to block. And the Bills' O-line this season is better than I ever remember it, and I think that they blocked the Ravens exceptionally well, and I think they could do the same against the Chiefs, because the Chiefs' pass rush isn't very good, and especially with Spencer Brown back, they blocked them well enough in the first game, and I was extremely impressed watching that game how often they picked up the blitz of Spagnuolo and how often Allen was able to find an answer against the blitz, right? They did do a very efficient job on third down, like I said earlier, 10 for 17. Houston was also very good on third down last week. They went 10 for 17 in that game against the Chiefs. So something to look out for is the Chiefs maybe not being as good on third down as they typically are. And for a team like Buffalo to maybe be able to hit some explosives when the Chiefs tend to get a little bit more aggressive and things to open up there. Because I do think that, you know, Allen doesn't take sacks. I think he's taken like 17 in 19 games. So he doesn't really take a lot of sacks. I do think the X factor, obviously, on this front is Chris Jones. Chris Jones is not only the X factor because of how good he is, but if there is a matchup for Chris Jones to win, it should be on the inside of the line of the Bills. Their tackles are exceptional, and it feels like their guard, their center could be the area where you can attack the most. So Chris Jones did get some pressures on Josh in the first game, but pretty much every single time, Allen made the guy miss, like every single time. So we'll see if he can convert those to sacks this time rather than getting ran by or just, you know, ran through. I think another X factor is Kansas City's secondary. Can they win their matchups on the outside similarly to Baltimore? Now, Baltimore, I do think, has kind of better, like Marlon Humphrey and Wiggins are really good, and they've got Kyle Hamilton. Like, I like the way that they go about kind of covering, but Watson could be a difference maker because Johnson, last time they played, he gave up a couple big plays to Amari Cooper early in the game. So can Watson, you know, level that out a little bit and allow McDuffie to maybe shadow somebody like Shakir? Shakir had a really good game. He was the leading receiver for the Bills in the first matchup. And it will be interesting to see what they do with McDuffie from a defensive standpoint. Like, did they put him on a Curtis Samuel? Did they put him on an Amari Cooper? Or do they have, like, and then they double team Shakir? Or do they have, like, Shakir get covered by McDuffie and then they kind of do some different things with their blitzes and things like that? But Amari Cooper had some big catches in the first half last time. Curtis Samuel had a good game. It felt like the Bills mostly moved the ball pretty well in the first game. Like I said, it was the worst game of the Chiefs season defensively. But the only area that the Bills really succeeded in the run game was Ty Johnson in the gun. So I just think when thinking about this side of the ball, it's going to come down to the Chiefs' ability or inability to get a little bit of pressure on Allen, which I tend to favor the Bills. It's going to come down to, can the Chiefs once again stifle the Bills' run attack, which I don't necessarily think they will. And then I do think the Chiefs can win in coverage, but if Allen has time, I don't necessarily think that it matters that much. So I definitely think the Bills are going to move the ball and score. Like, I definitely think they're going to score upwards of 27 points. So I think for the Chiefs to win this game, believe it or not, they're going to have to outscore Buffalo, because I think the Bills will throw in their quarterback run game. They have a very efficient screen game. They're very balanced on offense. They're going to have a number of different mismatches to look out for. I think the Chiefs can have moments where they play man coverage and stifle those receivers, but I just don't see how they get a lot of pressure on Josh, and his level of creativity might be able to overcome the disadvantage that he has on the perimeter. So even in pass matchups, we've seen that as well. So I definitely think the Bills are going to score a good amount of points. Now, flipping to the other side of the football, the Chiefs offense versus the Bills defense. Mahomes hasn't thrown an interception since he played Buffalo. He threw 2 interceptions against the Bills in a game in which they lost, the only game they lost. He threw 2 interceptions, one at the beginning, like literally the first throw of the game, and one at the end. The end one, I don't really care about. That doesn't really matter. They were already going to lose the game anyways. The first one, that was bad. It was really bad too. He just threw it like right to wrap, which was interesting. But the Chiefs haven't scored 31 points all year. Okay, which is an interesting stat because, like I said, the Bills, won this game 30-21. So it feels like, or the last game, 30-21. So the Chiefs are going to have to score maybe 30 to win this game, which is something they haven't really done all year. Now, I do think there is an avenue for them to do it, obviously through great coaching, great scheme, and then a couple of playmakers. I think the playmakers that they should rely on are Xavier Worthy, Travis Kelce, obviously, and Kareem Hunt. These are the 3 X factors for the Chiefs offense. In the first game, Travis Kelce was pretty much silent and not heard of or heard from. He had 8 yards the last time he played the Bills on 2 catches. And Worthy was really good in this first game. He did have one play where he had 1 foot out of bounds and he caught a deep ball that was going into Bills territory. He had 1 foot out of bounds. If he catches that pass, I think he would have had over 100 yards in the game. This was the first game in which I noticed that Worthy was utilized the way that he's been utilized for the entire season. He had a long reception on a deep post. He was very involved in the screen game. He scored the first touchdown of the game. This was the first game in which he was really used in the motions. He was really used in the screen game, the yak department, used as a downfield. He was featured in this game more than pretty much any game previous to this. Christian Benford covered DeAndre Hopkins like a blanket for the entire game. The Bills played a lot of man coverage, which is something that they don't typically do, but they definitely ramped it up against the Chiefs. The Chiefs actually used a lot of Mecole Hardman at certain points in this game, and it was pretty effective. And I actually think not using Hardman would be a mistake against Buffalo, because I think the way to beat Buffalo is by using as much speed and quickness as you can, because I think the Bills tend to be a little bit slower in their coverage, and I think quicker and faster guys give them issues typically, like Tyreek Hill used to, for example. 16-14 was the score for the entire third quarter, so neither offense was really able to do anything. But like I said, the Chiefs, they only scored in 2 of the quarters in the game the first time. And interesting enough, against Houston, DeAndre Hopkins, Hollywood Brown, and Juju, all 3 of these guys had 0 catches against the Texans. 0 catches. 4 targets, 0 catches. So they're going to need more than Travis Kelce to beat the Bills. They're going to need other guys to step up, like Worthy, like Hollywood. It will be interesting to see if the Bills do play more man again. How do they match up now with Hollywood? Because he's an added element here to the game plan. Like, if they want to put Benford, let's say, on Worthy, or Teron on Worthy, then, okay, do they put, is Douglas on D-Hop? That would make sense. Okay, then the other one, I guess, would take Hollywood. Like, how does that go? Who wins those matchups? That's obviously a big deal, but on third down, especially, the Bills would run like a 4-man rush, and they would have Bernard as a spy, and that caught Mahomes on 2 sacks in the game. Early in the game, they rushed 4. They got a little bit of pressure. Mahomes ran into the spy, and he got sacked twice. That was a wrinkle that we saw against Bo Nix as well, and even Lamar Jackson last week, that I definitely think we'll see again, where the Bills played a lot of man, and then they would have a 5-man rush technically, but one of the guys would be a spy. This is kind of the entire X factor of the game, because I think when you look at it from a perimeter standpoint, the Bills will have issues with all the movement, the creativity of Reed's scheme, the one-on-one matchups. I think if Mahomes has the time, I think he'll be able to make plays, but the question will be, will he have time like Josh? And this could be maybe where the Bills win or lose the game, right? Can the Chiefs run it to kind of keep the Bills at bay from a pass rushing standpoint, which the Chiefs have not been running the ball effectively all season? So this is a big deal. The Bills are, I think, top 5 in EPA run defense overall. They weren't great against the Ravens, but they typically struggle against power running teams that have a lot of big people on the field, and the Chiefs don't tend to run the ball that way. So will they throw a wrinkle out there, do multi-tight end formations, get a fullback in the game, do some funky stuff that way to run the ball and open the Bills defense up a little bit? That could be something that Reed throws out there. And maybe open up play action, which this was the highest percentage, the first matchup, the highest percentage of play action that the Chiefs ran all season was against the Bills. So I think they have the intent of running the ball and setting up play action to kind of toy with those linebackers in a similar sense to how Baltimore wanted to attack the Bills. But the problem is the Ravens are a historic level offense with a back-to-back MVP candidate, and the Chiefs, they haven't really been able to run the ball all year, right? One team had Derrick Henry, one team has Kareem Hunt, who might be able to hit you with a 4-yard gain, but not a 60. So the Bills' fear of the running game is certainly totally different, and I think that will allow them to play more pass coverage and pass defense and perhaps get away with a lighter box than what they were featuring against the Ravens, which is why I think they gave up so many plays down the field. But we'll see how that ends up. I also think that Joe Thuney has helped the Chiefs on the offensive line to protect Mahomes for the most part, except for last week, where he allowed 2 sacks against Will Anderson, but that is Will Anderson. It's hurt their running game, in my opinion, because the strength of their run game before was their interior, and without him in the interior, you've got Frank Caliendo in there trying to block people. So I don't know how that's, if they can run the ball, that's a big game changer, an X factor, and an unknown, because the Chiefs have not really been relying on that or even been efficient in that. So maybe they go with more screens, more of a extension of the running game sort of style, but I kind of feel like they do need to be able to run the ball a bit, because I think they're going to struggle with the pass rush of the Bills a little bit, because Thuney allowed, 2 sacks last week. The Texans had a 40% pressure rate against the Chiefs. And when you look at the matchup for matchup, like you've got Von Miller against Jawan Taylor on big downs. Von Miller's been very good lately. Ed Oliver was very good against Baltimore, and he could dominate Caliendo on the inside. And then you also have Rousseau against Joe Thuney. So can Joe Thuney kind of match Rousseau this time around and not have issues? I'd almost rather have the Chiefs maybe play Thuney inside to help their running game out, but I don't think that's what they're going to do. So when I look at the line of scrimmage, I kind of think the Bills will be able to rush the quarterback better than the Chiefs will be able to rush the quarterback. And I do think that Josh is better at running than Mahomes. So I do think that Josh being an element in the running game, even if the Bills' running backs aren't successful, I think there will be an element to fall back on with Josh running rather than Pat running. So I think the difference, honestly, for me in this game is that the Bills' running game is better and the Bills' offensive line is better. And I think that's ultimately the difference. That's kind of what I think. I think the Bills, the defenses are relatively the same. They play different styles. I think the Chiefs are maybe a little bit better in the secondary, while the Bills are maybe a little bit better up front in their front seven, but it's like very close either way. The Chiefs can win this game if Hunt runs the ball well, Worthy makes some explosives, and Kelsey makes the clutch conversions. The Bills will win this game if they outrun and outpossess the Chiefs, if they get to Mahomes more often, and if Allen makes a couple special plays. It should be a good game. It should be close. I could see a script that's fairly similar to last time they played, where the Bills win by about like 8 to 9, like 8 points. But I could also see it coming down to a field goal. I'm going to say that the Bills win something like 30-23. I think that will be my score. I think it will be like whichever team. I'll say if the Chiefs win, they win by a field goal, but I think if the Bills win, they win by like 6 or 7. That's going to be my guess. I do think the Bills are the better team. I do think the Bills match up really well with the Chiefs. I'm not counting the Chiefs out, but just from what I see in breaking down the game, I feel like the Bills have more advantages here. This is the first time I feel like talking about these teams playing each other where I actually feel that way. Last year, it was different because I wanted the Bills to win, but this year, I actually think the Bills are going to win. That's the difference. I actually think the Bills are going to win. I actually think the Bills are better. Last year, I wanted the Bills to win, right? There's a difference between the two. And yeah, the Chiefs are just going to have to prove to me on offense that they can actually do something, even against kind of a mediocre defense. Like, their offense has just been so kind of like vanilla, like not vanilla is not the good word, but it's just not been that effective or explosive. And I think that the Bills are more explosive. So I'm going to take Buffalo 30-23 in this game, and I think they will win this game. And I don't think the refs will be that involved, honestly. There might be a call or two, but I don't really think the refs are going to be involved because I think that the NFL has heard about, the concerns of fans. Like, I think at this point it's become so outrageous and like so over the top with the fan like amusement when it comes to this level of Chiefs stuff that I feel like there's probably not going to be a lot of calls, honestly. Soup says that the Bills will not win, but he has no reason why. Bodo says the Chief 24-22. Big Al's going Bills 28-20. Okay. Scott says I'm going to win a lot of money if the Chiefs versus Redskins win, so I'm sort of rooting for that. All right, Scott. We're on the opposite side of both games. Bill's Chick says, hi, Mitch. Kelsey is a weapon for them in the Super Bowl. Worried about him. Are you calling this game the Super Bowl? Thank you so much, Bodo, by the way, for the awesome super chat. 50 bomb in the chat. Shout out to the man, the myth, the legend, the Hall of Famer, the one, the only Bodo Winter in the chat. Thank you, bro. Courtney says, don't blitz Allen, he will torch you. Shout out to Courtney in the chat. Malia says that Rapp and Milano might not play Mitch. I think Milano is pretty much... okay, so the injury report, just to clarify that, because I know some people are saying that. I disagree. I think that the only guy that might not play is Rapp. I'm pretty certain that Benford and Milano will both play. I think that Milano has a hamstring injury, but I think all their injuries are fairly minor because they practice already. So the Chiefs don't really have any injuries, like current injuries that we don't already know about. Let me see if I can find it. Okay, so Matt Milano was limited on Wednesday, which is a good sign. Rapp did not participate. He has a hip injury. Bishop filled in for him for the rest of the game, the rookie. Deion Dawkins is sick, but he should be fine. And that's about it. And Teron Johnson was full. That's good news because he got hurt at the end of the last game. Benford was limited with a concussion. So seems like Benford will play. He also left last game. So I think the only guy that might miss is Rapp, which hurts, right? It hurts, but I don't think it's like the difference between winning or losing. Jake says the Bills beat the Eagles. Bodo says if the Bills win a Super Bowl, it will. What do you mean by that? Soup says Josh has no confidence in his team, hence why he always tries to do everything. I don't know if you've really watched Josh this year, but I don't really see that in his game at all this season. Rick says, do you think the refs help the Chiefs? Typically, yes, but I don't think that... I think it's a little overblown, and it's kind of like a meme. Soup says, I'm going to sub to this channel just to come back to say I told you so. All right. Sounds good. I hope you come back if you're wrong, too. Samuel says, do you think whoever wins this game will win the Super Bowl? I would lean towards saying yes. I think if the Eagles look like really impressive, there's a chance the Eagles could win the Super Bowl. I have no faith that the Commanders would win the Super Bowl. Zero. Absolutely negative. The Eagles, at least, you could say that they'd be the most talented team in the game. But I think the quarterback difference would probably outweigh the difference between the teams in the roster. I do think... I said last week the Bills and Ravens was the Super Bowl, and even more so this week. This is obviously the Super Bowl, probably. I think... now, the question would be, who would the Eagles and the Commanders rather play? And who would the Bills and Chiefs... I think the Bills and Chiefs would both rather play the Commanders. But I think the Eagles and Commanders... I think the Commanders... That's a good question. Who would the Commanders rather play? Probably the Chiefs, just because the Bills, like the Chiefs don't run the ball that well, and that's kind of like the Commanders' biggest weakness. The Eagles would probably rather play the Bills just because they lost to the Chiefs in the Super Bowl already. So they probably wouldn't want that matchup. Courtney says, Mitch, do you see the Super Bowl colors? Yeah, so they're red and green, right? So it could be either of these teams and then the Eagles. Jake says, Mitch, have you ever made a 2-game classic DraftKings lineup? Seems to be in your forte. Bro, I don't do a ton of DraftKings. I'm not going to lie. But yeah, it would feel that way. I don't know. I got too many other things going on to do the daily fantasy. I do a little underdog stuff, though, every once in a while. Bill's Chick says, Josh does not try to do everything himself. That's not accurate. The whole premise of our team is everybody eats. Soup thinks that the Chiefs will outcoach the Bills. I think that they have in the past, and I wouldn't deny that fact, but I also feel like these two teams are very familiar, and it's very hard at this point to outcoach another team. I think it's just going to come down to the players because they just know each other so well. There's nothing you can really add at this point. Neil asks how old I am. I am 28. All right, guys. Thank you for watching. Appreciate it. Gronk spike the like button. Subscribe. I'll be back with more NFL content. Best bets will be out tomorrow. We'll have some shorts on the TikTok for Owner's Box Fantasy. That's Doing Football if you want to check that out. Owner's Box Fantasy, go check it out, guys. And I'll have plenty of more. I have a Bleacher Report live stream tomorrow night at 7 Eastern. So yeah, a lot more content coming. Best bets we're going to do, breaking down the game, a little bit on the game, the spread. A teaser, what I would do with a teaser. We're going to do a prop for each game, and we're going to do the total for each game. So that's what we're going to do in the best bets video. That will be out tomorrow too. Thanks for watching. Peace.